All right, everybody. So we're doing our Campfire series, and I don't know how much of you guys like camping. Any of you guys don't like camping? You hate camping more so much? Okay, I know. Yes, some people will be okay. I like camping. It's not my favorite thing, but I do like it. And there's one thing I used to do every single year when I was a student at our youth group that I was at. One thing we did every year, and that was a festival called Creation Festival. Some of you might know it. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. Basically, what Creation Festival is, it's Woodstock for Christian music is basically what it was. We would be there. It would be in July. There's this big farm called Agape Farm that we would go to. We would camp out all week in July. It was super hot, and the showers were really gross, but it was a lot of fun for us students. I just remember my fondest memories of learning about Jesus was there. And when I got older, I didn't want to leave the youth group, but I was too old to be in the youth group, so I became a student leader. So because I'm not leaving, you can't kick me out, so I'm just going to lead these people now. So one year we go to this trip, and our youth pastor had just left to plant a church, and so my brother was leading this trip, and he's 2 years younger than me. It was his first big trip that he was leading. This is we're talking about 60 people are coming to this trip. You got to figure out the tents. You got to figure out the showers. We brought our own showers. You got to figure out the canopies and all the food you're going to eat the whole time. It's a lot of stuff you have to do. So my brother was leading this trip, and I was helping, and we're there, and things are going pretty good. He's doing a good job leading it. And then one day, we're about to eat dinner, and we just look at the skies, and it looks like it's going to destroy. The clouds are so dark, it looks terrible. And it was hard to get service, but somebody got service and was like, yeah, it's going to rain really hard, and the wind's going to blow. It's going to be bad. I've been at this camp before. We've seen some tents fly through the air like the Wizard of Oz, so we're like, okay, we got to figure out a plan. So all of us leaders get together, my brother, myself, a bunch of other leaders, and there's another leader named Mr. Tom. Mr. Tom was my favorite leader. He was an older guy. I don't know how old he was. He felt like he was 80 when I was a student, but he's still around, so he must not have been 80. But when I was a kid, I thought he was 80 years old at least. So, and I told him. And so we were all there, and he's a camper. He knows what he's doing, and he's like, hey, here's the deal. If it's going to be as windy as I think, we just need to get all the students in their tents, and that's what we're going to do. We're like, okay. So he makes this big announcement. Everyone get in your tents. Don't get out until it's over. So everyone runs to their tents, and they're hiding in their tents, and everybody's in there. And then myself and some of the other leaders are under the canopy just making sure nothing happens because we're the leaders. We got to make sure no kids get out, make sure none of the food flies away. And we're looking around, and we're looking for my brother who was leading the entire trip, and he's nowhere to be found. Like, where is Shane? He's a skinny guy, so I'm like, did he get blown away? It could be possible. So what happened to Shane? So we're looking everywhere. We cannot find him. He is the leader of this trip, and he is nowhere to be found when we needed him. We're like, Shane? And we look over, and we look in a tent, and all we can see are Shane's little eyes looking through the tent like this. Like, Shane, what are you doing? He's like, well, they told us to go in the tent, so I just went to the tent. It's like, get out, you're the leader. You're supposed to be. So he comes out, and eventually everything works out fine, and we're good to go. But man, I love camping. We used to do a lot of things by the campfire. It was awesome. And there's something about a campfire to me that it's just easy for me to put my phone aside. It's easy for me to just focus in on who's around, to reminisce on stories, to tell some new stories. And this entire series, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about some of the stories that Jesus told. And we're going to see what we can learn from what Jesus told. Because Jesus told what they're called parables, stories that Jesus told. And here's what a parable is. A parable is an earthly story with eternal meaning. It's an earthly story that everyone can relate to, but it has eternal meanings. We can get a lot out of it. So Jesus, he told 48 different parables throughout the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And in Matthew chapter 25 is where we're going to be picking up. If you have your Bibles, you can open up to Matthew chapter 25. He tells a story that, I love this story. You may have heard it, you may not have, but it's called the parable of the talents. Some background before we read the story together. Right now, Jesus is talking about a story. He's talking actually about two stories that are in the in-between times is what we like to call it. So there's a time where after Jesus dies, he's resurrected, and then a time where Jesus is going to come back. That in-between time, which is where we are currently, this is what he's talking about. He is talking about what we do in the in-between times. So first he tells the story of the 10 virgins, the parable of the 10 virgins, which my brother will be talking about to you guys in week 3, and then he tells this story. So Matthew chapter 25, we're going to read the whole story together, and then we'll break it down, okay? It'll be up on the screen as well. Again, It will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrust me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Verse 24. And the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent on the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvested where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So you may have heard this story, you may not have, but there is a ton to unpack here. So let me just quickly review this story with you. There's a guy who owns a property. He has 3 servants, and he's going away for a long trip, for a long vacation. When you take a long vacation, you know this. You go away, and then you get somebody to let the dogs out. Not who, the dog, never mind, okay. Yeah, it's not a song. You let someone get the mail, you have someone get the trash, and you entrust them with a lot of stuff because you're going to be gone for a long time. We don't know how long the master's going to be gone, but he's going to be gone for a long period of time. So he goes away and he trusts one servant with 5 talents, one with 2, and the other one with 1. Now we hear the word talent and we think, the way we think of talents, like, oh, I have now 5 talents. But here's what you need to understand. Talents were a weight of measurement that weighed how much money you have. So it's believed that 1 talent was about 50 pounds. Think of like gold bars almost, like 50 pounds worth of gold bars. And it was about $1,000, what some scholars believe. Let's just say it was $1,000, because that's what some scholars believe. It's about $1,000 that they entrusted. So one servant, he gives $5,000. One servant, he gives $2,000. One, he gives $1,000. Take that money. I entrust it with you. That's my money. I'm going to give it to you and trust it. He goes, after a long period of time, we have no clue how long, he comes back and he goes to the one with 5 and says, hey, so what'd you do with my $5,000 I gave you? He says, well, I mean, I invested it into Apple and they were making some great things and I doubled the money. So here you go, you can have it all back. I invested it, now it's $10,000, here you go. I said, great, good job, well done, good and faithful servant, come in, let's party. Go to the second one, hey, I gave you $2,000, what'd you do with it? I said, well, I invested into Disney. They literally are buying the entire world. They're going to run the world one day, so might as well invest into them. I doubled my money, and here you go. Here's $4,000. You can have that. It's like, hey, well done, good and faithful servant. You did a great job. And he goes to the last one. So the $1,000 I gave you, what'd you do? And he goes, well, I know that you're a strict man, and I didn't want to lose your money, so I lifted up my mattress and I just put it there, and I waited until you came back because I don't want to lose it. I don't want to risk it. So when you come back, here's your $1,000. You can have it back. And the master says to him, you didn't even put in the bank and build interest? You wicked, lazy servant, you're fired. Like, that was my Trump impression. You're fired. That's what he says. That's the recap of this story. That's what happens. So, with this story, what can we learn? What are we supposed to gather? What does Jesus want us to understand about this story? There's a lot of things we can learn, but I'm going to talk about 4 things, and if you have your message notes, you can write these down. Here are 4 things that I believe Jesus wants us to learn about the story of the talents. Number 1, we have everything we need. We have everything we need. The other day, I took my girls, Brooklyn and Savannah, to the Disney store because they wanted to buy these Anna and Elsa from Frozen. They wanted to buy little versions of them. See, they're really into Barbies, like really into Barbies. And they bought Anna and Elsa Barbies before, the normal size ones. And they like to have like mini versions of the same Barbie because that's their kids, is what they say. So we're at the mall. Makes sense, right? You guys are all with me? We're at the mall, and all of a sudden, my girls, hey, can we go to Disney Store and see if they have that? And I was like, you know what? I'm a great dad. We can. And if they have it, I'll buy it for you because I'm a great dad. Okay? So let's go to the store. If they have this little mini version of exactly what you're looking for, we will buy it for you. You can just have it. I said, okay, great. We go to the store. They look everywhere. They can't find exactly what they're looking for. They can't find any of the small Anna and Elsa Barbies. Remember, they already have Anna and Elsa Barbies. They just want a smaller version of the exact same Barbie they already own. They can't find any, but they bring to me this big old box. They say, Dad, I couldn't find it, but guess what? I did find this. This is a Mickey Mouse Clubhouse slide elevator with all these things. It's awesome. We'll get this instead. So I look at it, and this sucker was $150. So my kids, whom I love, I would jump in front of a moving car for them. I laughed in their face. Said, I am not buying this for you. Put it back. They went, why? I said, because it's $150. They don't understand money yet. It's $150. He said, you said you'd buy us this bar. I said, I know. We're like arguing in the Disney store. And we're like, you guys okay? It's like, I'm dealing with this. I'm not buying this for you. It's $150. Go put it back. If you can't find it, we'll find another day, and then we'll buy it. They got all grumpy. Like, what, you never buy us anything, which is not true. I buy stuff all the time. Everything they have, I buy them. You don't buy us. Who do you think bought them the original Anna and Elsa? Now they need a mini version. I bought them the original ones. No, you don't buy us anything. They got all grumpy. That was a couple weeks ago. You know what I have yet to hear about since that day? The mini Anna and Elsa. They didn't really need it. They already have their Barbies. They have a million Barbies. You ever been to my house? They have so many Barbies in the house. They have everything they need. If we found it, it was a bonus, but they have everything they need. They can play just like they normally can with all the Barbies that they have. And it's true for us as well. We have everything that we need. Everything we have, God has given us. Every opportunity, every strength, every gift that you have, God has given us. Who you are, your strengths, your actual talents, God in his loving mercy has given that to you. And God, who loves you, has given you everything that you need. Not everything you desire, but everything that you need. The first verse in this story, Matthew 25, verse 14, said, again, it will be like a man who's going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. Entrusted his property. This has nothing to do with the servants. The servants didn't earn this. It wasn't the servants' property at all. The master said, I'm going to entrust my property to you. It's mine. Trusted his property. It was his, not theirs. They didn't earn it. They didn't do anything to deserve it. It was given to them freely. That's what it was. Now, when I read this story, and maybe some of you might relate to this, but at times I look at the third servant who got 1 talent, and I tend to think, why did he only get 1? Like, he had to watch as the first guy got $5,000. The second guy got $2,000. He's like, oh, here it comes. And he gets $1,000? How come this guy gets 5 and I only get 1? And I always tend to think, that doesn't seem fair to me. Maybe some of you think that. It doesn't seem fair to me. But let's really break this down. Let's say I pulled Frank up here and I said, hey, Frank, here's $100. Some churches, they actually do this analogy. I'm not doing this. I don't have $100. So Frank, it's a pretend, okay? I should have brought Monopoly money. He comes up here and I gave him $100. He didn't have $100. He didn't do anything to deserve it. I just gave him $100. And then I went to Matt and said, hey, Matt, here's $500. Frank will probably get jealous and go, wait a second. You got $500. Why'd I get $100? But what did Frank do to earn that $100? Nothing. He was $100 cheaper. $100 is a bonus. There's nothing he can do to convince me that he now deserves $500 because he didn't deserve $100. There's no fair or not fair in this situation. See, you cannot be jealous when you understand it's not yours. You can only be grateful. When you understand that it's all a free gift given to you, you can't be jealous about what other people have and how much stuff they have. You can't be jealous. You can only be grateful. But when you start to be jealous, it's because you think you deserve more and it's not fair and it's actually mine. It's not. When you struggle with jealousy, it's because you think you deserve more than you actually do. See, God has given you everything you need out of his kindness. It may not be as much as someone else around you. You may not think it's fair, but when you understand who it is from, the proper response is gratefulness, not jealousy. If gratitude isn't your response to what you have, it's because you don't understand how you got it. Number one, I think that's the first lesson he wants us to know, that we have everything we need. Number two, we aren't all equal. We aren't all equal. When I was in fifth grade going to sixth grade, I went to a children's camp. Have no idea what it was called, but I remember going to this camp for the first time. It was the first time I was away for a very long time, and I went with the church I was at, and my best friend at the time was a guy named PJ. He was there with me. And at this camp, it's a middle school camp, but if you're fifth going to sixth grade, you can go to this camp. At this camp, you learned about Jesus, and I connected with Jesus in a more real way than I had at that prior time. But the big thing that everyone talked about at this camp, it was the banquet. So all week, all of us middle school kids were trying to find dates to the banquet. We couldn't wait. And I don't know why they even did it this way. It's seemed like a terrible idea. But I remember we were so excited about going to the banquet. And being fifth grade going to sixth grade, I didn't actually want to go with a girl to the banquet. I just wanted girls to ask me. Because at that point, we're not asking. It's like Sadie Hawkins saying, I'm not asking. They can ask me. So it became a competition between PJ and myself. How many girls do you think are going to ask us to the banquet? We're getting ready to go, and I'm bringing my best clothes to camp. I'm excited. And throughout the week, it's happening, and then at the end of the week, one girl asked me to the banquet, and it was awesome. And I went to my friend PJ and said, PJ's a pretty good-looking guy. The ladies seem to like him, so I was like, hey, PJ, how many girls asked you to the banquet? He said, 32. 32? I didn't know there were 32 girls in this camp. First off, I think he was lying. He had to have been lying for my own insecurities. He had to be lying. But I was like, I only had one ask me. He had 32. And I remember from that day on, I was so jealous of him. I remember dreaming about it. I was like, man, how awesome it'd be if I looked like PJ, but I act like myself because I like my personality better. But what if I looked like PJ? That'd be awesome. I remember having these thoughts in my head all the time because I was so jealous because we were not equal. If we both stood here and people were bidding money for a date, he would have won. We were not equal. We aren't all equal, and we don't really like that. Sometimes we see other people around us why did they have more than I do? How come they are naturally more talented than I am? How come they had better opportunities than I had? How come they got to live in the childhood and have the family life that they had that I never got to have? That's not fair, but we need to understand we are not all equal. Matthew 25, verse 15 says, to one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Notice that part? Each according to his ability, to what they could handle, each according to his ability. They were given what they had not randomly, not without thought, but they were given the talents that they had according to what they were able to do with the talents that they got. The 1 talent servant, the last one, would not have been able to do more than the one with 5. The 5 had more ability. They are not equal. They were not given as much. They had different abilities. They were not equal. But here's what you need to understand and what you need to remind yourself when we look at this and go, why aren't we all equal? Here's what's important. The master did not judge them on what they produced. Because if he did, then the first servant would have gotten a better reward, right? He produced 5. The second servant only produced 2. They both got the exact same reward, both of them. Here's what happens to both of them, Matthew 25, 23. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. He didn't go to the one and say, hey, I thank you for getting 2, but he got 5. You couldn't give 3 more? It had nothing to do with what they produced. It was their obedience with what they had. So you can waste your time saying things like, how come I'm not as smart as this person? How come I don't get as much? How come they get this and I don't? How come my family life was not this way? How come they get the great job and I'm trying to find a job? How come this? You can waste your time doing all that, or you can understand that you are not equal and you can be grateful for what you have been gifted instead of looking at everybody else's gifts. We're not equal. You can complain and say it isn't fair, and you can bury your talent like the third servant did. You can bury it, and you can waste it. You can waste your opportunity, or you can be thankful for what you have and use whatever it is, whether it's a little or a lot, to glorify him. Number 2, we aren't all equal. Number 3, we work for him, not us. We work for him, not us. I don't know if you noticed it, but they take the money, They doubled it. The first two servants did. The third one didn't do anything with it. And what do they do with all the money that they've earned or hidden? It all goes back to the master. It's not theirs in the first place. It comes back. The interest they made, they didn't keep the interest. They didn't keep that extra 5 or the extra 2. It all goes back to the master. They don't keep what they earn. They are servants. And the servants are only stewards of the master's investments. That's all they are. Our goal is to maximize whatever we've been given, our talents, our opportunities, maximize it not for selfish purposes, but to honor him with whatever we have been given. And here's what it really comes down to. It comes down to our heart. It comes down to our attitudes. It comes down to our motivations. Because for a lot of us, we take what we've been given and we have the improper motivation. We are trying to make ourselves look better and feel better by whatever opportunities we've been given. So how do we define our success? See, our success doesn't change your servant status. How much you earn, how much you are given, how much you do with it. It doesn't change the fact that we are servants for the master. This past week, I had the opportunity to interview the guy who runs the Preachers and Sneakers account. My brother and I do a podcast, and we had talked about them, and we contacted, and we were able to interview each other. If you don't know what account that is, it's an Instagram account. It has like 200,000 followers, and they post pictures of big celebrity pastors, and then they zoom up on their shoes, and they tell you how much those shoes cost. Sometimes it's like $4,000 shoes that they're wearing out. So it's like really, really expensive stuff. So I had the opportunity to interview the guy who created this account, and he's gotten like New York Times has interviewed him, all these different relevant magazines. He's been on, like the Today Show has asked for an interview from him. And so it's got pretty popular. And I was talking to him about it because I struggle with it sometimes where I don't like the idea of a celebrity pastor who's flaunting their wealth, but at the same time, I don't know the hearts and I don't know how they got it, and there's a lot of things that go with it. And I was talking to him about it. And one thing that stuck out to me is something that he said. He said, I constantly have to check my heart when I post these things for what my motivation is. He said, sometimes I feel like I'm posting things because I'm jealous that I don't have what they have, and I'm posting it out of jealousy and spite. But then at times I feel like the Holy Spirit is leading me to call out hypocrisy. But I have to check my motivation. So what is your motivation when it comes to what you've been given and what you do with it? See, here's in Matthew 25, 26 through 27, here's what he says to the last servant who didn't do anything with it. He says, the master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. See, don't waste it because at the end of the day, you ain't keeping it. Because it's not about you. It's all for his glory. So if you're here and you are a great athlete or you are a great musician, you can have the motivation to make yourself look better than everybody else. That can be your motivation. At the end of the day, it's going to be a waste because you're going to eventually die. It's all going to go away. Or you can take that opportunity and that gift that you've been given, and you can glorify God with the way that you play your sport, with the way that you play your instrument, whatever it is. If you are lucky enough to be wealthy in our world standards, whether it's because you worked your butt off and you got the opportunity you got, whether it's because of the mind that you had that were able to learn things that were valued in this country, or whether you were lucky and you got a job that eventually moved up on. Whatever it is, if you are lucky enough to be wealthy, you can either take it and go, look how great I am, look how important I am, look at how famous I am, I'm going to buy whatever I want with it because I earned it. Or you can go over here and you can say, you know what, this is all a gift. I'm not better than anybody because of what I have, so I'm going to be generous with what I have. That's what you can do. If you are blessed with a spouse and with kids, you can make it all about you, or you can honor God with how you love your spouse, and you can honor God with how you parent your kids. Number 4, we will be held accountable. The last one, we will be held accountable. And I don't really like this one all that much, but it's true. I've heard this story told many times as a tithing sermon, as a sermon to talk about how we should be tithing. And I understand where it comes from. I understand why it's used that way. And it can be used that way, but I think it's a little short-sighted, and it kind of leans a little too much towards prosperity gospel, where if you give, you're going to be... Anyways, so it doesn't have to do with our money, yeah, possibly and probably, but you need to also understand, you will be held accountable for how you use everything God has gifted you. You'll be held accountable for how you use the finances that you have. But you'll also be held accountable in how you use the strengths that you have, how you use the opportunities that you have. I mean, from the very beginning, we were responsible and held accountable for what we did with what we were given. Genesis 1, verse 28, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves on the ground." From the very beginning, God called us to be fruitful and multiply. That means to have families. That means to build churches. That means to build schools, build cities. But he also said to subdue the earth, to take care of it, to plant trees, to use your creativity to make the world a better place, to build bridges, create music, whatever it is. See, the unfaithful servant didn't waste the master's money because the master got his money back. The master was upset because the unfaithful servant wasted his opportunity, not the money. And when he wasted the opportunity, the master said to that servant, "You wicked and lazy servant." Matthew 25, 20-30 here's how the story ended. "So take the talents from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has been given more, for he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." That servant was held accountable not for losing the money, because he didn't lose it. He was held accountable for not doing anything with it. See, success wasn't just making some money off of it. Success was taking the opportunity and glorifying God with it. That's what success should be for us. I'm going to close with this story, and if you've been here, you may have heard this, but if not, this is a great time for you to hear it. When we planted this church, it was a year ago, and our first Sunday, some of you were here, some of you were not. Our first Sunday, we had a huge crowd here. We have pictures of it if you haven't seen it. But we had a huge crowd here. It was 215 people were here on a Sunday. Ton of people, right? We had 14 churches that supported this church plant, and so a lot of them came. One of those churches, my brother's church, canceled church, and so a lot of their church came. So we had 215 people come, and it was awesome. It was a great way to celebrate. But I knew that that wasn't realistic. I knew that it was all these other people. And so I had a plan for next week, and my goal for the following week, because I'm a achiever, I'm a guy who cares about numbers, and I'm trying to be very practical with things. My goal was 75 people. It's like, if 75 people come back next week, we are killing it. But in my head, I was thinking, yeah, but we could probably have 100. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if 100 came, because we're killing it. We're doing a really good job. The next week, it was a very rainy day, which if you have been around church, you know that people don't go to church when it's rainy or when it snows or when it's too nice out. People avoid church. So it was raining, and 61 people came. It's still great, but I was expecting 75, and in my head I was expecting 100. So I was discouraged, but it was raining. So next week we'll be fine because it was raining today. Of course, people stayed home. It's raining. That's everyone tells you. Next week, beautiful day, 61. And I was upset. I was like, but I did all the stuff I was supposed to do. Like, I followed all the procedures, and God, how come there's not more people? I thought we'd at least have 75. I thought 100 people would be back. What's happening? And I got super discouraged about what I thought was unsuccessful. So we're starting on a bad foot. And I remember talking to my wife about it all the time, and she is very good at speaking like the Holy Spirit to me. And she told me, is that really what success is? Like, is that, like, if there was 100 people, then you were doing a good job? Is that what God thinks success is? Is that? So over months, I had to humble myself to remind myself that it has nothing to do with, if this church grows to be 1,000 people, it's not because I'm a great leader, and if this church gets smaller, it's not because I'm a terrible leader. But it's because God is blessing this church in the way he is, and we have the opportunity with who we have. And then I told that story to another pastor friend of mine, and he said something to me that really stuck with me ever since. He said, thank God 100 people didn't come. Could you imagine what would happen to your ego if 100 people showed up? You already thought it was all about you. And if it worked out, you wouldn't need God at all. Thank God that happened. It's like, you're right. See, we will be held accountable for what we do with what we have. You will be held accountable for what you do with what you have. So the parable teaches us that it isn't about how much you have. It teaches us that success is taking what you have been given and accomplishing your calling through it. That is what success is. Taking what you have been given and accomplishing your calling through it. So what is success for you? How do you define success? Because you're going to be held accountable for it. Is your family success that your kids grow up and they never get in trouble and they make a lot of money one day? Does that mean you're a successful parent? Or is you being a successful parent showing the love of God to your kids, that no matter how they turn out, because at the end of the day, it's not in your control, right? They have free will, that you love them so much and they know that they are loved and that they have a heavenly Father that loves them, that even if they turn out and they don't make the money you thought they were going to make and they aren't as successful as the world says they should be, or if they get in trouble when they get older, that you know that you did everything you can because you were honoring God with what you had and you were holding it. You were being held accountable. What's success in your career? Is it making a ton of money? Is it having this higher standard? Is this being promoted and being in this level where, man, you are just so powerful? Is that success? Is success being really famous? Is that what success is? Or is success taking the opportunity that you have and you working diligently and you working hard and you honoring God with the way that you work so that people see you and go, man, you work differently than everybody else. And it's because I know a God that has done amazing things. Is that what success is? Because you're going to be held accountable for how you work. Is your success in marriage the fact that you just never get in fights and that you take these elaborate vacations? Is that what success is when it comes to your marriage? Or is your success in marriage about you humbling yourself, you caring less about you and more about the other person, and you honoring God with the way you are married? Is that what success is? Success in your marriage, fighting for your relationship no matter what. No matter how hard it is, no matter the ups and downs of marriages, because they all go through it, is that what success is? Because you're going to be held accountable for it. See, our goal is to take the opportunity that God has given us to work our butts off on whatever it is, whether it's a lot or a little, whether it's a lot of talents or not, whatever it is, working so hard to glorify God with him, because at the end of the day, everything we do is going back. And we're going to be held accountable. So we're going to close with another song that talks about another parable we're going to talk about later on. And as we sing this song, I want to encourage you to think about what success is in your life. How are you thinking you are successful in life? And are you aware that you will be held accountable? Can we pray together? Dear God, I thank you for this story that you've given us. I thank you for you entrusting us with what we have. Our gifts, our talents, everything that we have, our ability to work, our strength, is all a gift from you. God, help us to be grateful for what we have, no matter how much it is. Help us to remember that we're not equal, and we don't need to be equal. You didn't make us equal. God, help us to remember that it's not about us, it's all about you. And I pray that you convict us in a way that we look at our entire life and all the opportunities we've been given and everything that we have in our life, and we understand that we will be held accountable for what we do with it. God, help us to put ourselves aside in our marriages, in our parenting, in our jobs, and whatever we have, put ourselves aside so that you can be lifted up. So at the end of the day, it's all going back to you. I pray that as a church, that We are responsible for what you have given us, for the opportunities that we have been given in this community, for the people that are here. Help us as a church to not make it about impact, but to make it about you. Humble us. Remind us. We'll be held accountable. That you are the master. We are the servants. Everything we have is a gift from you, and everything we have is going to go right back to you. Thank you for entrusting us. Thank you for calling us. Help us to define success the way you define it, by moving on the opportunity you've given us. We love you. We praise you. In your son's name, amen. Let's sing this last song together.